What is seen and what is not seen? Economics is the study of comparison and choice. A person can be smart in many ways, good memory, rich imagination, strong ability to imitate, and so on. However, there is one very important and indispensable kind of intelligence, and that is the ability to make the right choice at a crucial moment. To make the right choice, you must first bring out the things you need to compare and weigh them on both sides of a scale. Economics teaches you that when comparing, you should not only consider what is seen, but also what is unseen. When I teach economics at university, the first article I always recommend to my students is What is Seen and What is Not Seen by the French economist Frédéric Bastiat, which he wrote more than a century ago. This was also the last article he wrote before his death. We know that economists come in many varieties. Some are academics, others are professionals in the industry. Some focus on macroeconomics, others on microeconomics. There are Austrian economists, Keynesians, Chicago School economists, and many other schools of thought. But there's also another way to categorize economists: good economists and bad economists. At the beginning of his article, Bastiat firmly stated that the only difference between a good economist and a bad one is this: bad economists can only see the visible consequences, while good economists can simultaneously consider both the visible consequences and the invisible ones, the outcomes that can only be speculated. In other words, this is an important sign of whether someone has received proper economic training. Welcome to the Economics Made Easy channel. Here, we break down economic principles in a simple and easy to understand way and show you how to apply these concepts in your everyday life. If you find this helpful, don't forget to subscribe, like, and turn on notifications to get more practical economic insights right away. We've all heard the story of the broken window. It says that when a mischievous child breaks a window, the owner must buy a new one, which stimulates the production of windows. The window manufacturer receives an order, gets paid, and with that money, they buy bread. The baker then buys clothes, and so on, triggering a chain of production. Supporters of this fallacy argue that destruction leads to progress, and that destruction itself is good. This line of thinking is quite common in society. Every time there's a disaster, be it a hurricane, earthquake, or tsunami, there are always economists who step forward to argue that while the disaster caused great harm, it has also created opportunities for employment and GDP growth. But is this really true? Can hardship actually build a nation? If hardship could indeed build a nation, wouldn't countries that avoid disaster be at a disadvantage? There is a variant of this fallacy that argues some countries have gone through long detours and made significant mistakes. But looking back, these mistakes were actually beneficial for their development. For instance, they point to Germany's experience in World War II and Japan's bombing by atomic bombs, suggesting that these countries developed rapidly after such crises. Of course, we can't assume that if a country didn't go through these earlier tragedies, the later developments would have been the same. But we can ask, if other countries want to achieve rapid economic development, like Germany and Japan, do they also need to be destroyed by war, or be bombed with atomic bombs first? Clearly, no. In fact, these countries would have accumulated more capital and had a stronger economic foundation had they not faced those wounds. Similarly, in the broken window story, if the window had not been broken, the homeowner's resources could have been used elsewhere for production, potentially generating more wealth. This is the part we often don't see. Another variant of the broken window fallacy concerns employment. Some say that older workers should retire earlier to make room for younger ones, or that if machines replace workers, then workers will lose their jobs. Therefore, advanced machinery and older workers staying in the workforce too long are seen as bad for social development. Let's think about this the other way around. Imagine our society used bulldozers, but we decide to switch to using spoons to dig. Would our society become wealthier or poorer? If everyone retired 20 years earlier, would society become wealthier or poorer? The common mistake in all of these broken window fallacy variants is that they only focus on the employment opportunities created by natural disasters. Human destruction, aging, or outdated tools things we must address to cope with the problems at hand. If we could avoid disasters, if people lived healthier lives, and if machines were more advanced, the saved time, resources, and labor could be used to produce other, more efficient goods, making our lives richer. The problem is that what we see are the jobs that already exist, and what we can't see, the human labor, time, and resources that could be saved for new production, is something economists cannot define precisely. We can only speculate. This is the difficulty in recognizing the broken window fallacy. It's something we know with reasoning should exist, but we can't pinpoint where. Bastiat also wrote an ironic article, The Candlemaker's Petition, in which he humorously argues that since sunlight reduces the need for candles, candlemakers petition lawmakers to ban sunlight. Indeed, if people used sunlight more, candlemakers' work would decrease. But in reality, once sunlight is available, candlemakers won't be permanently unemployed. They can find other work. The problem is, what is that other work? No one knows. It can only be imagined. The same logic applies to the substitution of horse-drawn carriages with cars. When cars were introduced, carriage drivers lost their jobs. Economists would say, "I can see what's not seen." I predict that carriage drivers will eventually find new work. But the question is, what is that new work? No one knows. It can only be imagined. Bastiat also questioned whether the government should subsidize high art. Many people would answer, of course. But Bastiat countered that when the government uses taxpayers' money to subsidize high art, those funds are no longer available for other purposes. So, others lose out. When we compare, we should not only consider the high art itself, but also the effects it brings and the effects that are lost. And, like with lost effects, we cannot say exactly what they are. We can only speculate. Seeing the unseen requires the economic vision that comes from studying economics. Stephen Levitt, a professor at the University of Chicago, wrote a famous book for economics, which became very popular. In the book, he presents an example. Today, many environmentalists oppose the use of plastic bags because they cause significant waste. But this economist argues that the more plastic bags we use, the longer food stays fresh, which reduces food waste. What we need to see is not just how many plastic bags are used, but also how much food would be thrown away if we didn't use them. Do we want to throw away more plastic bags or more food? We need to make a comparison. Of course, it is important to clarify that I'm not saying everything unseen is more important than what is seen. What I am saying is that whenever we make decisions, we must fully consider those factors that are not yet seen or that may never be seen. The core issue that economics addresses is comparison and choice. To make good comparisons and choices, one important premise is that we must not only see the things that are visible, but also try to see those that are not so easily seen, those that can only be perceived through speculation.